Hello everybody, happy Monday. We are going live today with Michali. We're an hour earlier due to a request that I had since I could not make it at 11. And we're just going to wait for somebody to show up and for Michali to join. And we have a good question today. It's actually from last week's AMA that I did. So there was a question there were many questions that I didn't get to. Hey Michali, let me invite you. Thank you everyone for joining.
Hello. Hi.
So
Good morning.
Good morning. It is like so early for me.
Bright and early, 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock. 8 o'clock. I'm like up since 6, but like it still feels so early to be like talking. Anyways, okay. Thank you for being flexible with the timing. Really appreciate it. You have no idea, these lives are so loved by our community. Like I asked for, like so many people have said like the lives, like they love them. They love them. So like I couldn't even share with you all the messages, but I plan to share more like just with everybody.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm happy that we're pretty like good about not missing a week. So I'm proud of us also.
Go us. Yay.
What's today's
I'm
question?
so touched by the feedback. I'm really so touched by the feedback because, I think that I'm sure, you could attest to this too. When you're putting out content on social media, I think sometimes the best practice is to just put it out there and not obsess over the likes and the comments.
Totally.
And it's just, if you just want that information out there, if it benefits people, great. If it doesn't, they can move on.
Exactly.
And so, but I think that the downside to not exposing ourselves to painful or hurtful things is like we don't get to see the positive things or whatever. So I think that it's always so heartwarming when we get to like actually hear such kind feedback and that we're making a difference. So I am
totally
so glad to
I'm always so surprised with it. You should know, like it's so funny. You think that like we do all this, we do everything that we do only for good feedback, but like I so don't. Like I so just like I'm like I have this like thing where I'm like tunnel vision. Like maybe this just as like being my friend, and like I'm just like tunnel vision in a sense, and like some part of that is positive in the sense that like I don't listen to the noise as much as people do, and then when I get all this good feedback, I'm like, oh my god, this feels really good. Like
yes, exactly. Exactly. And I know some like big like social media people like or not even big like social media, just big people in general, like let's say Sam Harris, like like he like I think he's the one that like literally Dafka will send something out and he will never read a single comment. And like I think that's brilliant in terms of just like what he like how he devotes like his mind space to like in his life, but like at the same time it's kind of like to what we're saying, like we miss out on all the fun nice things.
You have to have some sort of a balance, I think, because like at the end of the day we are serving people and we want to like be in service to them, but I also think, especially like in the beginning, like if the feedback can deter you from doing what you're doing, it's better to like turn a blind eye. And I just kind of did that naturally, and I'm like, wow, this is so cool. So thank you everyone for your feedback. It does make a difference. It definitely keeps us going, and also it feels so good to know that we're actually making a difference. So thank you for that. Anyways, today's question, I have this like blockage. I can't remember. I remember something about like parents, but like what is it exactly?
Yes. Oh my gosh, you have good memory. Okay. So the question is, are there ways to work on having less resentment towards one's parents out of the context of therapy? If therapy helped, but it's getting expensive and there's still work to do. Thank you.
Okay. Go for it. What are your thoughts?
So I wish I knew how old this person was, like if this person is like a teenager versus an adult.
Like are they living at home with their parents?
Yes. And just how much autonomy they have. But I think there are a few things. I think that if you're an adult, my general perspective is that parents did their help and their damage. It's done. And now it's completely in our power and control, and it becomes our work to pick up the pieces and do something different or similar to what we've experienced, right? It's not a parent's jobs anymore to live our lives and to fix some of the damage they've done. It's our job to fix that. Once we become adults, whatever you call it, like it's early in the morning, so I don't even have words. Prior to adulthood, when a person is a child or an adolescent, then the responsibility is on the parents to repair the harm and the damage, right? So I'm going to assume that this person is an adult, because majority of OK Clarity community members are adults.
Yeah.
I think that just understanding, whatever the issue is from that context and framework of now this becomes a me thing and now I need to pick up the pieces regardless of who caused it. That sometimes can help to kind of depersonalize, oh, my parents did this to me. I think the other piece is that we oftentimes have resentment when we get disappointed by people. And oftentimes we get disappointed by people when we have expectations of them that they have not met.
Yeah.
And so it's what?
I was waiting for that.
Oh, yeah. Drum roll.
Yeah.
Expectations, disappointment, and resentment. Yeah. So I think that the work here would be to identify what are my expectations and can they, knowing everything I know about my parents and their humanity, can they meet those? And if they can't, then to shift our expectations, not by ignoring them, but by finding another way to give our expectations of other people, giving that to ourselves. And that's also part of being a grown-up, is learning how to give to ourselves what we wish other people would have given us. And there oftentimes is a grief process involved in that, because no, I want other people to give it to me. I don't want to be the one to give it to me. I'm hurting. Someone else should be taking care of me, right? We want to be taken care of.
Especially if you didn't get it in your adulthood, then I feel in your childhood, then you spend your adulthood craving that that type of attention and wanting somebody else to do it because you didn't have it as a child potentially.
Exactly. And I think that it's okay to say to people that you are close with, that you do feel loved and safe with, I really could use a hug, right? And at the same time, if let's say, I'm just going to make up an example because I just came up with the hug thing, if let's say you needed more affection growing up and your parents were not affectionate, right? And they're cold, and you're hoping that when you walk in their door and they see you, they'll give you a hug, and then they don't, right? So that's disappointing, and that can create resentment. Oh, why do you have to be that way? Why are you my parents? Why are we so different? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me, right? And I think that saying to myself before I go to those parents, okay, I'm going to hug myself, or I'm going to go to a friend before I go to my parents and get that hug that I need, and then remind myself I am so loved and cherished because I love me. They might love me in a different way. That's a limited way, but I love me. The last point I would make is that it helps also to view parents or any human being who disappoints us with, almost as if they have a handicap. And I know that sounds extreme, but I think that we all have limitations, right? But when we use the word limitations, it sounds like, okay, but they can really overcome the limitations, right? That's why I use the word handicap, because I think that when we think of the word handicap, it's oh, they really cannot do it.
Right.
And most human beings want to do the right thing. And if they could, they would. Which means if they're not, they can't. And that oftentimes is a handicap, whether physical or emotional. So I think learning to depersonalize as much as possible and own what you need and take care of what you need can create some space and take away some of the intensity of these feelings.
Yeah. I love it. And it's similar to two words that I wrote down, thinking about this live. I was thinking compassion and accountability. Compassion is to have whenever I'm really upset with somebody, as hard as it is, I try to dig in as soon as I get over maybe the anger phase or whatever it is, to find some compassion, to realize that everybody, similar to what we spoke about last week, is everyone bleeds red, everyone's human, everyone has a weakness, everyone has something that we can, dig into, that we can have compassion for. And typically the people that hurt us, especially if it's a chronic hurting us, maybe a parent, they really struggled and they really have handicaps. And we can find so much compassion for them. That doesn't mean you need to now never, hold them accountable, or depending on where you are in life or whatever it is, but or that they don't have to take accountability. I don't think it helps for us to hold them accountable. Actually, I take that back. But I think that deep, tapping into that compassion can really, really help. And at the same time, like we said, if this is an adult, I think accountability is so important, because like accountability for ourselves, like now we're the adult, now we're no longer that child, as much as we want to live in that space, but you don't have, like, we need to take accountability that we do not live there anymore. And now we're in charge of getting our needs met in whichever ways we can. And in charge
including
of
nurturing that child, right? Including
exactly,
nurturing that inner child.
exactly,
Yeah.
but not hoping that the parent will, right? And not hoping that somebody else
Yeah.
will, unless we communicate that effectively and find that supportive relationship. So yeah, so that's what I was thinking. And I think that that pretty much, like, what can they do to not have that resentment? And then I was thinking, of course, like, this is something I always fall back on because it's a big part of my life, but I know that it doesn't necessarily fit for everybody, is like emun and bitachon. And like something that I always constantly hear on everything that I listen to is like how no person can harm you or help you. So like realizing that like God preordained that this is exactly the type of thing you should go through, whether it was a parent, whether it was a child, a spouse, whatever it is. And like it helps to separate yourself from the anger at the person. Like create space, like similar to like
Yeah.
what mindfulness and meditation does. Again, that doesn't mean that they did everything 100% accurately. It doesn't negate anything, but it creates space for you to heal, I find. So
Yeah, it's like using spirituality to understand that there's purpose and meaning
exactly.
in the stuff, in the pain. And it's kind of like that. They actually added, I think they call it meaning, to the last stage of, as the last stage of grief, like
Yeah.
of the,
Yes.
it used to be like 5 stages and now it's like 6. But yeah, I would also just add to what we're saying 2 things. One is this person did say therapy is getting expensive. There are so many services out there that can offer really inexpensive therapy. I'm not pushing therapy on you, but if you are wishing that you could have continue to be in therapy, and you mentioned therapy did help, but it's really the issue is expense. There's so many options out there and so many resources out there and organizations that can help fund therapy. The other thing I'm going to say is that because I don't know this person's circumstances in childhood, I want to just, kind of specify that if this was an abusive kind of situation, everything that you and I are talking about kind of go out the window, and at least for now, because when it comes to abuse, I think the deeper work really needs to be first and foremost about trauma treatment and how to almost sometimes be angry at the people that hurt us. Sometimes it's like the opposite issue of like not having enough anger, right? And kind of teasing out anger from resentment, that it's, kind of, the disappointment type of work and expectation work we talked about, but really tapping into, I feel angry, which is a healthy feeling to feel in that kind of context. It's a longer story, but I just want to say that there is a difference between having an abusive childhood versus a somewhat unhealthy childhood where a person got hurt, but it was somewhat normative.
I hear that. I don't see what, besides for the fact that like I agree that you need to have that grieving process and like feel that anger. I don't necessarily think that anything that we said goes out the window though. Like I still think there's place for like in the healing. I think to properly heal, you want to go through that process of yes, anger, yes, getting validated and recognizing what's normative, what's not normative, where you fell on the spectrum. But I think that compassion, even for abuse, is like it can help, and I think it's part of healing. I think for many people, accountability. If you're an adult, I think that taking accountability, like, if they're abusive, then do not, be in their presence, as, limit that as much as possible, create healthier relationships, et cetera, et cetera. I'm saying the accountability piece, I think, is still there. And of course, I think emun bitachon can fit everywhere. But you have to be ready for that, and it has to be something that you identify with, or at least are willing to. But I definitely think that, like, yes, 100%, if there's some serious abuse, then you want to make sure that you're getting that therapy, even if it's expensive, that you're figuring out a way to get that, because you don't want to just like sugarcoat what you've been through, because it's going to keep cropping up in your life. You want to really heal it on some level, or at least get the truth out there for yourself, and the feelings and the anger. And the
you're right. I would agree with you. I think you're right. I think that a couple key differences. One is that distance is important. When, we shouldn't go near poison, we shouldn't drink poison. So toxicity, abuse, like those kinds of things we want to have much firmer, stronger boundaries with, and create distance in the name of getting ourselves to a place of health. Then the other piece is more like kind of regulating the nervous system and trauma work. That would be a necessary first step to working on the resentment pieces, because I think that that we need to kind of be back to ourselves and like inhabit our own minds and bodies before we can actually work on our minds and bodies, you know. But and then I think I would agree, you're right. I think that process we've outlined kind of comes into play. Yeah.
Love it. Thank you so much, Michali. I think this was a great, like,
Thank you.
we tackled it from like 360. So I appreciate that. Yes, amazing. I'll see you next week, and thank you
See you
everyone,
next week.
and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Faye. You too.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.